Welcome to the Gathering Place podcast, where I am your host, a real estate agent in Augusta, Georgia, and North Augusta / Aiken, South Carolina. My name is Joe Seaman, and this is my lovely bride, Miss Hope. We call her the Jill of all trades.
We got it down to science.
Chaos coordinator.
Yes.
So,
yes. And today
you were in charge of coming up with our topics for our podcast.
I was.
And so, as always, the minute we start, my phone starts going off.
Yeah.
So it happens every single time.
We'll snooze it.
But it's all good. But we've got a really interesting podcast scheduled for today.
Yes.
Something you are extremely passionate about.
I know.
And
I kind of wish I wasn't, but I am. I just can't help it. So, probably in past podcasts, we've talked about my slight obsession with the Murdaugh murder mystery situation in the low country of South Carolina. Well, now we're more into the upper part of South Carolina, the upstate. So we're moving towards Myrtle Beach in the Justice for Micah case that's actually active right now. So when you guys watch this, I'm sure you will have heard all about it. So I'm kind of in the throes of that, studying, trying to figure out what's happened, what's true, what's not true. So there's so many things in social media, and there's so many times that people, I call them limelight chasers, jump in and just start throwing information out that just to kind of
I literally saw one
themselves.
post that I had seen yesterday on someone else's page, but this other person literally copied and pasted it and posted it as their own with no credit. So I specifically went to look to see if they gave credit, and they gave no credit to the original creator of that. I don't like that
when that
either.
happens. I hate when that happens. But we're all obsessed with situations. Some of us more so than others. And while this is ultimately this is a sad situation. The things that are coming out, though, is kind of what I want to talk about today, in that whether, this man did this or not, or whether it was self-inflicted or not, like, he is responsible, and that's very obvious. He is responsible for the event that led up to whatever happened. And I've been asking myself over the last 48 hours, where were the people? Like, how did she tolerate this? Like, how did she think that? Why did she accept this, or why did the...
Tell us a little bit of backstory, because you kind of jumped ahead
Well,
there.
I did kind of jump, because I think most people already know at this point. But long story short, there's a church in South Carolina in the upstate. The pastor is speculated whether or not he's involved in the unaliving of his wife. And there's just a lot of narcissistic abuse and behavior that happened up to that point. That's all being brought out now by her family, by former members of the church. And this woman essentially was just terrorized. And that's pretty much at this point a fact. There's text messages from him. There's affidavits from her family. There's lots of stuff. But all that to say, this poor woman was trying to cry for help for a long time. And she just felt trapped. She didn't feel like she could be heard. She didn't feel like people would support her. She didn't feel like her husband, who was supposed to be her number one supporter, was the one that was hurting her the most. And it's just one of the things that I kind of want to, I'm not factual enough, I feel like, at this time to even have a full-on conversation about this. I'm still learning. We're all still learning. We may never actually know what happened behind closed doors to this young woman. I do hope that justice is served in some form or fashion for her memory, for her family. But I want to talk about things like in our life, in our marriage, that we do, because it's very obvious he did not respect her in any way, shape, or form. It seems, Drew and I were talking earlier, did everything possible to show him respect, to serve him, but he took that service to a whole nother level, and that's just something you and I have never done. We've never looked at each other like, okay, what can I do to serve? I mean, yes, what can I do to help you today? What can I do to make your life easier today? But it's never been like you demand anything from me and vice versa.
Woman, you better get in there and vacuum that floor, and there's vacuum lines better be straight.
Listen, fun fact, when we first got married, I'm sure you heard it in a couple of podcasts before, but my sweet hubby grew up. His mom would vacuum her way out of the house, and that was his definition of clean. Don't get me wrong, her house was clean, but that was his image of clean. And so when we first got married, that was not on the high part of my list of things to do. And so it was a little bit of source of contention. But anyway, all that to say,
I'm kidding, by the way.
I know. We didn't put carpet in our house when we rebuilt together either. So we nixed that in the bud. But anyway, you and I, while yes, the first couple years you're married, you're trying to figure out that dynamic. At some point along the way, we just got to a point where we just came up with a system. It's unspoken. But there's things that you do for me that might not make sense to you, but you do them for me because of things that have happened in my life that make me insecure, make me uncomfortable, whatever. And there are certain things that I feel like you needed growing up or in situations that I step into that role and go, hey, like I try to fill in those gaps, right? So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. The things that we do to fill in the gaps. Because when we first got married, you and I both would say that your love languages were acts of service. Mm-hmm. But somewhere along the way, words of affirmation became a key point. Like you
swear prior to
it was
words of affirmation was probably number 5 on my love language test. Mm-hmm. It's probably number 5.
I don't even know. Yeah, it was like
number
the last
1.
one. Yes. Yeah. And at some point or a lot that like switched on us.
And I could care less about acts of service.
But you still serve by doing that.
I serve others, yes.
You serve others, but you receive differently.
Mm-hmm. Which is odd, because normally you receive and give
what we learned. But what we learned is that, like, as life goes on and you get older, that's really not true, because I give and receive different ways too. Like I show love in different ways and I receive it in different ways. But long story short, the point is we respect each other. And I think so many people these days don't even try to take the time to figure out their spouse and what makes them tick and what are some things they can do. They just think it's all about them. And in this situation with, I think his name's John Paul Miller, it was all about him. You're not like that. I'm not like that. We joke.
It's not the Joe show?
We joke. Drew's over here laughing behind the camera because I'm like, it's not the Joe show. Or I
thought it was all about the Joe show.
All about Joe. But we joke about that.
I'm kidding.
We joke. We kid. But ultimately, those are the things. So okay, let's talk about it. If you follow us on social media at all, Joe is really good about tagging me in everything. Everything.
You may not like for me to tag you in everything. And
I do. I appreciate that.
Someone actually said, why do you tag Hope? You don't have to tag Hope in everything. And I'm like,
yes, he does.
I actually want to tag Hope in everything. Yeah. Because that just shows the outside world that we are one unit. Mm-hmm. That we are, if I post something, you're going to be right there with me.
Right.
And so, but on the flip side, I appreciate you not tagging me in everything. Okay.
See, we balanced each other out. I do tag you in some things, but I don't tag you in everything, because that's not, honestly, you do that to show a unified front, but you also do that because I have an insecurity. So you 100% realize that that's something that I struggle with, that you did not create, but you realize that and you go, okay, this will make my wife more comfortable, and you do it. And so I appreciate that, because I just don't think people do that enough. I think they live in this me world, and then in their relationships they're doing the exact same thing, and we have to do it with our kids too, and that's a struggle sometimes.
Well, I mean, just talking about that topic of social media can go down a dark rabbit hole really quick if you don't have that. I'm not saying either one of us have struggled with this, but it can go down a path that you aren't even expecting for it to go down and never think it'll go down.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that's
So we had a pastor one time. I thought it was so odd when he did this, but I had their child at our house, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna we're gonna meet back at the church," so that I was talking to the mom. I think that was it. I was talking to the mom, and I was gonna meet back at the church, and their child was gonna go back with them. And I like text the mom. I was like, "Hey, I'm headed to." Joe was going to go to the church and take the child back, and meet at the time was our pastor. But something happened, he couldn't, and I was like, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to meet. I'll be the one. I'm bringing your child to the church." And she was very sweet. She said, "Okay, thank you for letting me know." She immediately, in the background, I didn't know this, just totally rearranged the schedule for them. She came and met me at the church because that was something they set in place a long time ago, is, don't meet someone of the opposite sex in a situation where it could be misconstrued. And I thought, that is so weird. But the longer I've thought about that over the years, it is something that we do try to do. Now, Joe's in real estate. I can't go with him everywhere. There are times where,
it.
he has to have a conversation with a female or whatever. Like, we're not that rigid. But in that case, it was meeting someone in a parking lot to transfer children. And while that may be innocent, it can be, one, misconstrued, or two, it could be all different things. And so I've thought about that, and I just thought that was actually very healthy, because I think we all need to have boundaries in our relationships. Anyone can fall. It doesn't matter how strong your connection is. Anyone can. The enemy just needs like a little kink in the armor, right? So I just think that safeguard is a good thing, and I've respected that, and it's something that I've tried to implement even to this day. Like, if I have a conversation, very rarely, unless I think this person's like my brother or something, a family member, or someone that's super close to me, very rarely will I even have a conversation with someone via text without someone else in the message, just because I think that's a smart thing to do. Now, that I'm not telling everyone that's what they need to do, okay? It's just things that we've done to show respect to each other, vice versa. But ultimately,
There's nothing that I require, because I'm totally like,
no, he doesn't. It's just something
whatever.
I'm like, hey,
I'm
here's
very,
the transparency.
very secure in our marriage.
Yes.
I'm very I don't care.
He doesn't.
It doesn't bother me one bit.
And I'm not insecure about it. I just have these things that came with me from childhood, that, not necessarily saying it was my childhood, just things that happened growing up in different stages of my life, okay? That it's just one of those things I developed, and you respectfully see that about me. You don't judge me for it, and you just go, okay, this makes Hope's life easier. This is what I'm going to do. And vice versa. I feel like there's things that I do or try to do that make your life easier as well, because it's important to you. And I
That's
think
why you got the name Chaos Coordinator.
yes,
That's where that came
100%. I'm still working on this whole philosophy with our younger children, though, because goodness gracious, they are polar opposites. And meeting them where they're at sometimes can be very challenging, but I'm still trying to navigate that too. But ultimately, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I know we may have derailed about 50 different ways, but if you learn anything from this podcast, I would say it is, in a marriage, it is not just one person's show. And if you're in a situation where it is a one-person show,
Like this guy.
I would say evaluate in some way, shape, or form.
This
'Cause
preacher guy.
I don't think it's healthy. And what this guy has successfully done is tainted the work of so many good people out there in the pastoral arena. And he has just tainted it for a lot of people. There are a lot of good pastors out there. Not everyone's like him.
Well, also, not only for a pastor, from a pastoring perspective, by the way, did y'all know that somebody thought, one of Hope's friends thought that I was a pastor?
Oh, my Lord. That was so funny.
She's like, he sells real estate. How did you think he was a pastor? So,
Lord. I mean,
but anyways,
I was not
that
meant
was
to be a
recent-
pastor's
that
wife.
Was, that was recently.
that was recent. I told him a long time ago, I was not
not.
meant to be a pastor's wife or a politician's wife. Either one of those, but go ahead.
So not only has it kind of tainted, people who are a little skeptical about religion and pastors and all that anyways, what about the people that are kind of skeptical about marriage?
Yeah.
And now, they're hearing about this, and we're talking about it because it's close to home.
Yeah, we are. That's the only reason we brought it up.
But,
And for us, it's in the forefront at the moment.
those people who are skeptical about marriage, marriage has been one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me.
Vice versa.
I always say you're a one and done, but I have loved being married to you.
Yes.
But those that are very skeptical about being married and getting married and all that, I think that this puts a pause on that,
Yeah.
And then also, if you just see those tendencies in somebody,
Yeah.
don't just blow them off and sweep it under the rug and they're just controlling or they're this or they're that. No one needs to live that way.
And you can't enable people's behavior. That's ultimately how he got to the position that he's in. Someone along the way enabled his behavior. And now it's just hello, here we are. And
But it's that total narcissistic
Yeah,
tendency to where,
narcissistic I mean, it's-
everything was
I go
the
back
wife's fault and he
Yes.
did no wrong.
And that's not the case.
But it's just, you've got to pick up on those clues of over controlling, overbearing,
Yeah.
won't let the other person have an opinion or speak or all
Yeah.
kinds of things. And it could go both ways. It doesn't
Right.
have to
It
be
isn't-
a male dominant thing.
No. Absolutely
I
not.
think
Absolutely not.
Yeah, so it could be a total
Total opposite.
female thing as well. It's not just because the man.
Everyone has
whatever,
the
but-
ability, everyone has the right to have a voice and feel heard and feel loved and feel secure. And if you don't feel that way, then you got to figure that out. You're not meant to be a mouse and you're not meant to be in total control. So those are things I would say.
And what we were talking about earlier is the 5 love languages by
Yes,
Dr.
Gary
Gary
Chapman.
Chapman. If you've not read the book, I think they've done spinoffs.
There's a book and
there's all kind of stuff.
you can take
now,
a quiz
but-
online, but it really just helps you figure yourself out because that's another way to connect with your spouse.
Yeah, and share it with your spouse. Let
Yeah.
them know how you give and receive love, because more than likely, if you're 90% of America, you're going to marry your opposite. And so the way you give and receive is probably going to be very different than the way your spouse gives and receives love. Hope is absolutely touch, affection. She needs that hug every morning.
Words of affirmation.
To where that is probably number 5 of mine, physical touch.
100%.
It is
but
probably
you,
that's number 5
but
on
you
my list.
suck it up and you
But
let me hug you.
I hug her every morning
Yes.
because I know that's what she needs. But
it sets the tone for my whole day, but
Yeah,
it means
but-
a lot to me. It's simple to you, and I think that's ultimately what we want to talk about, or what we're trying to say is whoever your significant other is, it is not just the way you do things. That's not the end all, be all. It is a two-way street, and they receive and give in different ways as well. And I'm not saying you need to change who you are to accommodate, but I am saying you should compromise who you are to accommodate. If that person is important enough to you, you accommodate. So
I agree.
I mean, that's what in the 5 love languages, while they can change over time, clearly, it is something that is very helpful, especially when you're first starting out in marriage. And so that's what we kind of want to talk about today. My heart goes out to that family and what they're going through. But
and follow Hope on her personal page, because she keeps up with it. She's not, I wouldn't say she's like a true crime fanatic, has
But
to
I
know all the big true crime stories. It's just stuff that's more local, more
yes.
closer to home.
And I like to know
follow.
facts. I don't like to know people's speculations.
Yeah.
Those annoy me. I want to see court documents, and I want to see affidavits. I want to see paper trails on everything. So, it's just a slight obsession of
because
mine.
you actually wanted to be a court reporter
I did.
growing up.
I still wish I'd done
going
that.
through the Murdaugh murders,
Oh, Lord.
people actually asked you why you did not do like court reporting and all of that.
I wish I'd done that.
Literally, people would say, because the trial was on during the day, they couldn't watch it. Most people work. And so literally people would say, I would just wait for Hope to update on Facebook every night. And that was basically her way to report that day's happenings. And so do you think that's going to happen with this one?
Well, we're going to have, I don't know. It's too early.
Very,
it's so
very
early. It's
new.
a week and a half into it.
I think what's so odd, and then we'll kind of wrap up, is this guy is a preacher. He literally preached a whole sermon on Sunday, giving no clues.
I get mad. My blood pressure's
and
going
then
up.
after the sermon, he announces to the congregation that his wife
has
passed the night before.
And made sure to say it was self-inflicted. Whole nother story.
Anyway. I think that is so odd to me. Like,
it's terrible.
I think they were going through some trouble. They were separated.
Absolutely.
Even if you were separated, like you were married to that person. I don't know how you could
do a
preach
whole
a sermon, but
we digress.
Yep. But anyways,
whole nother podcast.
Maybe. But if you are married, if you're thinking about getting married, if you're in a serious relationship, like definitely talk to your spouse, loved one, whoever you're going to marry, about those boundaries and your feelings and what.
Because your feelings matter. They have to be important.
What is important to you? What is important to that person? And find a compromise there. One person may hate eating chicken. And
one person may hate dirty dishes in the sink.
Whatever. But find that compromise, and just always know in the back of your mind, if you can find ways to serve the other one, not physically like serving them, like what can I do for you today? Not that way of serving, but if you can find a way to serve them some kind of way.
In a way.
Yeah. It's always going to work out for the best.
Yeah.
So, this is not marriage advice.
No, it's not. It just was on my heart today. So there we go.
Even though Miss Cindy has always told me I need to write a book on marriage.
Miss Cindy Key.
Miss Cindy Lowe.
Miss Cindy Lowe. Oh my goodness, we love her too.
I love her. So anyways, thank y'all for joining us on this episode of the Gather and Place podcast. We will catch y'all on the next one.